Hello, it's Sunday night, and yes, it's time for another live stream. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the HDZero Gamma AIO, the one I nearly leaked online last week. We're going to talk about the beginner drone world, which I feel like there's a real push in FPV right now into the beginner drone world. And I'm a little frustrated that the downsides are not all being spelled out. And whilst I haven't got some of these products to review, it is something I want to talk about because we are in this mist of, hey, artisan-based digital FPV system, yet these products are shipping with remote controllers that aren't supported by the projects. They're limited digital FPV systems, and frankly, there are better places out there for you to be spending your money to allow you a path into FPV that will be smoother in the future. Because cheap at any price doesn't mean it's a good idea. We're also going to be talking about this, the Antigravity A1, and I want to talk about range issues because we're starting to see more and more people get their hands on it. I actually flew mine for the first time today because the weather here has been horrific. I've got some initial thoughts about the drone. I haven't even looked at the 360 footage yet because the weather hasn't been good enough. But I do have some thoughts on the drone itself, the FPV system, but also there is a lot of confusion out there when it comes to the Antigravity A1, what it should be like compared to DJI OcuSync, but also what people should expect. And there is a big fundamental difference here in how this works compared to one big thing that many people have with DJI products, which is FCC hacks. But we will talk about that in a minute anyway. And obviously we are literally now 3 days, if that, from the DJI countdown. There has really been very little change. So I guess it's now time to say what happens next. And look, creators are putting out videos everywhere, and I'm guilty of this because I did one. We talked last week that there was an interview this week by DJI themselves who, interesting, they did it with Faruk on iPhone. I'm surprised DJI are only later coming to the table on talking about this. And frankly, they should have been talking about this the way they did with iPhone's video 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago. And honestly, genuinely, they have handled this situation so badly, it's crazy. You know, they've been sitting there saying nothing. They should have been doing the interview circuit. I would have happily had Adam on here to talk about it. Look, there was no one who wasn't interested in promoting the bad downsides to this, but we'll talk about that as well. Obviously, we're coming towards the end of the year, so from an FPV perspective, it's a little difficult. I flew today for the first time in 3 or 4... No, it's probably 7 or 8 weeks. The weather here in the UK has been horrific, especially where I am. I managed to get some flight time on this today. Let me just find it. I flew the little one, which I have to say, the Wally FPV Eagle 2. I love how this little quad flies. I finally managed to get a couple of packs on it and took it down the beach and around the field, and I haven't had a great time, but I have to say, what a great little flying quad this is. What a great little 04 Pro quad this is. The only downside is I found the battery life very low on these batteries, although the first time was my error because I didn't charge the HV batteries fully. I didn't realize they were HV, and I didn't dunk it, no. Oh, I did dunk something. I don't know if you can see that. There's a... Oh, wait there. Let me go wide. Can you... I don't know if you can see that. There's a quad drying on top of the PC over there. I don't know if I killed this today whilst doing the tests of the wide-angle lens kit from Flywheel, because it fell out the sky and died. And I was like, oh, and I couldn't get it to work again. But I have to say, this thing, right, the Wally FPV Eagle 2, what a great little quad. And I tell you, what I love about it is how stable this thing is, even without gyroflow rocksteady stabilization on. The footage from this is rock solid. I show it in the video, and it was rock solid. It's really a great little quad. If you're looking for like a non-obtrusive 04 quad, really consider something like this, or consider this. But what a great little bird that is. Honestly, really enjoyed it. So the video I finally finished of that, the weather has just stopped me. Honestly, it is such a great, and I tell you what's weird about it is how great it flies out of the box. The tune is so smooth on it. I was blown away with how well it just flew on day one. And if I just, if I go to here a minute, and I'm looking for the goggles footage more than anything. That goggles? No, that's audio. This one. No, I don't want goggles footage. I want air unit footage. This one here. So this is unstabilized, okay? So there's no stabilization on this. I was going to shove it to gyroflow, was what I was going to do. And I just taken it on the beach for the second flight. And whilst you will see some jitters now and again, I have to say it is incredibly stable, considering, you know, there's no gyroflow on this at all. It was a nice calm day, and you will see the odd bit of movement, don't get me wrong. But yeah, it was horrible. It's just been overcast and wet. But you'll see in a minute. It just really surprised me how stable it was. The weight probably helps because it's not super light, so it does move around a little bit. But yeah, it's just it just flies so well for a little quad. I just felt like I wanted more flight time from it. That's what my only complaint with it was, flight time. You can see how confident I was. In the end, I had it straight over water. We did it. I had it in the field for the first few tests, and then I took it down the beach. Yeah, it was low tide. Yeah, it was. But this wasn't filming weather by any means. It's just meh weather. This is the Wally FPV Eagle 2. The only thing I think you're going to struggle with it is, and this is unstabilized. I promise you, gyroflow is, this is just as it come from the quad. And that's what shocked me, was just how stable it was. The only thing I really would say is I don't think it's got the battery life on that size pack as a freestyle quad, because I was getting like 2 to 2.5 minutes and I just felt like I wanted more. But yeah, it does look great. It really does look great. And I did try to, and I always tend to then push at how low can I go? How low can I go before dunking? You know, I love how 04. Look, we're a big fan of many digital FPV systems here. HDZero, lowest latency without question. Avatar HD, well, don't get me started there. But, you know, the image quality in 04 is just insane when you just look at the... But, yeah, it just a great little quad. So I got to fly that at 10 o'clock, yes. I got to fly that today, so the review on that's finished. I got no downsides. I just think about battery life, I'd like a bit more battery. But that was with the 380 milliamp hours 3S. But what a bit of kit. What an absolute bit of kit. As I said, I did have some weirdness with... which one is it? Is it this one? Which one is this? Let me just... No, that's the Eagle 2. Oh, no, I wasn't bloody recording on the one that died. Sorry. So I can't show it. But yeah, great little quad. What's not to like about that? Really is. Now, starting on, the first thing we're going to talk about, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I've just finished the video on the AIO, well, the Gamma. But for those who didn't see, HDZero have released this week. This is the HDZero Gamma. Yes, I nearly outed this on the channel by accident last week on the live stream because I was going through that box and went, I don't know what that is. Let me look at it later. So I've only just had this in just over a week ago, so I'm working my way through it. I'm not going to say there's a review coming. Review isn't the right word. I haven't flown it. There's an overview coming. But look, this is the Gamma 45 amp AIO from HDZero. It's got a G series flight controller, 45 amp ESC, and a Express RS receiver built in as well, as you can see there. Unlike the AIO 5 and 15, there is no HDZero on this one, so this is in the HDZero camp of building flight controllers. HDZero have been making some real nice electronics in recent times. Remember, they've got a number of flight controllers and ESCs, and this is another one. Really nice thick PCB on this, 1.8 mil by my measurement. Castellated pads, single-sided soldering, so everything solders onto what I'm going to call the top of the board here, and just really nicely put together. Again, when it comes to the soldering, you can solder to the edge of the pads or you can solder to the top. 3 UARTs, I2C on board as well, or I2C I should say. So if you want to use GPS, you absolutely can. And yeah, sturdy little monster this. 25 by 25. Very fun. No analog on board. This is a digital VTX, but again, you can use this with any digital system. It isn't just HDZero. Obviously, it's going to work very well with HDZero, but it also is quite happy to pair up with the likes of DJI 4. In fact, they've even got a receiving UART for the receiver on the pinout as well. So if you wanted to use it, you absolutely could. Has an 8-volt back on board for the output, AM32, SX1280 receiver, AT32 chipsets for... pardon me. AT32 chipsets for the ESC. So yeah, AM32. What's not to like? It's as simple as that. 79 quid, AIO, or $80, $79, $80. 3 to 6S. Yeah, what's not to like? It really is as simple as that. The full video will probably be tomorrow. I think that one will go up tomorrow. I literally was just finishing it now. Yeah, what's not to like? It really is as simple as that. Ideal for 2.5 inch, 4 inch builds, something like that. 25 by 5 mounting pattern, 33 mil I think the board is, edge to edge. You can mount it any way you want. You can adjust that in Betaflight because it runs Betaflight. You absolutely could mount it whichever way you want. Very nice indeed. Very nice indeed. So look, again, HDZero are really doing some nice hardware. You know, if we ignore it, yeah, they'll always have an arrow for forward because that's going to be your forward of your gyro. But yeah, well, it's 25 by 25, so it's 45 as standard. Yeah, but you can mount it whichever way you want. At the end of the day, you can calculate. You can calculate that in Betaflight anyway through your configuration. Yeah, you got your arrow is 45. But yeah, very cool. Very cool indeed. Really nicely done. And there's a barrow on board. I don't know if I mentioned it. Just not for the analog guys, though. Tough. Only digital goodness gets this. So yeah, look, it's really nice to see. I've been working my way through that. That's been the last couple of days, just having a look at it. I'm now trying to get through. I talked about the battery box and stuff last week on the live, but I'll be talking about them, and then I'm hoping over the Christmas period to start on things like the new VTX. Weather is just horrific here at the moment. And just to give you an idea of how bad, if I can plug this in, I know the VTX works on this, but I didn't look as if this my goggles didn't record. What I don't know is why the goggles didn't record when I had this flying. I don't know if the VTX did. Let's have a look. I know the VTX is fine. It was the flight controller that was a problem. Now you will see. Now I don't think I've got the focus right on this lens, so just take that into account. This is the camera I converted myself, so I need to get the focus adjusted. It's focused a little bit too close. Just take that into account with these kits from them. The focus isn't ideal. This, you can see how wet it is here. There's water everywhere, right? So you can see there's water there. There's a massive puddle over there, but the ground was so good. But you'll see in a minute. Yeah, I definitely need to refocus that lens. But you'll see in a minute, it just falls from the sky. It was fine. Yeah, that focus it's not great on this kit. This was the one I converted, and I was having trouble with it. See, did you see it just fell out the sky? And I was like, okay, why was that? That wasn't what was planned. And this was the first flight on it. But yeah, the focus, that is not right on that lens I've converted at all. I'm going to... Yeah, no, it wouldn't. The FC died. It wouldn't come back up after that. It wouldn't even boot after that. I'm just trying to see if I can show you the puddles. So I'm going to swap the camera on this for the one that but I just wanted to show you the puddles. The rain here. I don't know if I... No, I probably don't have it on that footage. Where I will have it is actually on this one, because I also flew the Eagle 2 at the field as well. This was the first test flight we missed. This was literally the first test flight at the field. You'll see over here, that puddle over there always scares the crap out of me. Same thing happened to your Firefly 18, interestingly. Yeah, it's very wet. It's very, very wet. Yes, there's water everywhere. Yeah, look, I hadn't fully charged this, and I was like, oh wow, what did it take off at? 4 volt. See? So I'd already lost some power on this. The second flight, things were a little bit better, but again, that's armed. Yeah, so I hadn't fully charged them to HV voltage. I thought I did. I forgot they were HV, so when I charged them, I forgot about it. But you'll see over here, I go towards the grass is sopping. The grass is absolutely soaking. That puddle is always, you know, just to give you can see how much water is just standing. It's so hard this time of year. It really is. I got a bit more flight time from it when I was down the beach, once I charged the batteries properly. Yeah, it's just not the weather to have a quad go into the grass on. This was literally the first flights with it, just so I could get used to it. You can see there, but the only downside is you could see we're already... I was not in any way going to risk this going into the water. So I was just literally just scooting about. Trying to, yeah, it's soaking. Look, just the weather is just horrific this time of year. It really is. But look, such good fun, a little quad like this. And then I took it down the beach and flew it over water. I was going to go through there then. I thought, no, I better not. So you can see there, as soon as I punched out, we got the low battery on it. So, but yeah, I'm not sure on this lens kit for my flight. Not iFlight. On Flywoo, the mod yourself. I'm going to swap it for the pre-modified one because I'm struggling to get the focus right on this. I really am. But yeah, look, HDZero have got the Gamma, which is a very nice AIO. A very nice AIO indeed. If we go to the desktop, you can see here the layout on it. And again, I'll talk about this. I'll talk about this in the video tomorrow. But yeah, just a really nice controller. Really is. And look, they've got some good gear now. When you actually look at HDZero's heat combination of heat gun and blade. Not heat gun on the lens, some warmth, and then a blade. But look, HDZero have got a really good range of flight controllers now. You've got the Halo, which is a really nice controller in itself. So again, a very similar wheel to the Halo, but this has got your ESC. So it sits between the Halo and the AIO 5 and 15. But they're doing some really nice electronics. Someone just asked what happened to third-party HDZero electronics. Look, I think HDZero's world now very much seems to be they want to do it themselves. We saw Free Sky do the X20 HD, but we haven't really seen anything else with HDZero built in. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if it's possible. I know Foxeer were doing it, and it never happened, didn't it, if we remember? I think it was Foxeer. I swear it was Foxeer. We saw the prototype, but, yeah, you know. But, yeah, look, really nice little controller. What's not to like? So that's the Gamma. Emax, that was it. I thought it was Foxeer. No, it was Emax. I think there was one from Foxeer as well, was there not? I vaguely remember there was one from Foxeer. So, look, the video on this will come out tomorrow. That's where we're at on that one. Right. The next thing I want to quickly talk about is this, because there has been reviews of this week, which is the Aquila 20 HD. I don't have one. I can't comment on it. I don't have the product. I did send Beta FPV an email and they haven't even responded. So what can you do? I don't have any intention of running out and buying this. I don't need another bind and fly right now. It is interesting, obviously, with the ArtLink VTX. If we get that appear on its own, then I will obviously order one of them in and have a look. But I'm not going to run out and spend $358 on a bind and fly kit right now. I just don't feel it's necessary. What I am disappointed in, though, again, just like Caddx, Beta FPV are shipping this with a radio which doesn't have full support for Express ELRS. So again, the light radio for Light Edition, I think it is, or SE, they're including with it, is not officially supported by the Express ELRS project. So once again, we have a manufacturer, just like Caddx, shipping a product that doesn't support the project that they're using the firmware from, the open source project. I don't know what firmware it's using. I'm guessing it's PX4 again. I'll be honest, I suspect all of these quads are coming out of the same place, which I bet you is this cap company. I'm starting to think this cap company is behind a lot more than we realise. And I suspect this might be coming out of this cap company. It's got S mode, it's got visual positioning on the bottom, so it's probably running PX4. I don't know if anyone's tried connecting it up to Q ground control. Again, what is a real shame here, and these are the words that will stop Beta FPV sending me one, once again, you have companies basically selling people e-waste, because whilst that remote is going to be fine with Express LRS 3 series of products, we are on the cusp of Express LRS 4, and the reality is you're going to have to go out and spend more money. This falls under the same problem that Caddx had originally with Protoss. When I discussed the Protoss, my big complaint was the fact that there wasn't Caddx. There wasn't digital FPV VTXs, and the remote system wasn't compatible. They have obviously released the standalone Ascent VTX now, so you can build this into your own system. So plus points from Caddx's perspective, they now have an ecosystem. You know, we have a drone and a VTX. That is an ecosystem. I'd like to see a VRX module, maybe some higher power VTXs. It's still not great because you can only build yourself a 100 milliwatt VTX. That's all you can do. There is no other option here. So it's still not a great path into other products. I'll be straight with you. I would recommend instead you buy Avatar HD based and go for the 1S Mini Late. Take the GoFilm 20. The GoFilm 20 is a great quad considering. It's got a Moonlight on board. It's not this, but the GoFilm is a great quad. Look, longevity perspective, that is going to do you better. Whereas this today, you know, another 100 milliwatt VTX, it's not a great buy. If you look at Avatar HD, you can go from the 1S all the way up to the Moonlight, all the way up to the GT. DJI, you can get the Air Unit Pro 4, but you can get the Pro as well. Gives you lots of options. HDZero, they have their Whoop VTXs all the way up to their higher end VTXs. They give you a number of options. There's a 500 milliwatt, 100 frames a second until it comes. It doesn't exist today. When it comes, it's on the Discord. I haven't seen anything about it until it lands. We've seen the military one, but we haven't seen the standalone. Again, 100 frames per second is going to be no good with these goggles because these goggles won't support 100 frames a second. Okay, you can enable the goggles to receive it, but the display on this isn't doing 100 frames a second. It's a 60 frames a second goggle. So you still need a bigger ecosystem. If there's bigger VTXs coming, great. Where are they? When are they? When can people buy them? Because, again, how long have we been waiting for the GT2? How long have we been waiting for the Moonlight 2? That is a problem. That is a problem. So, look, Caddx are by far doing better than Beta FPV in this. Where I really don't like this murkiness is shitty remotes that are not supporting the open source project that they're based on. So again, you know, that remote is junk, frankly. And when you compare it to like the Radio Master, you know, to even to the T8L, at least this fully supports the project. You know, these are... And actually, here's the worst part about this. Caddx have a... no, let me phrase this. Caddx don't have an excuse, but at least they don't have a past of making remotes. Beta FPV have been making Express LRS remotes for years. They know what they should be doing. So Beta FPV actually have no excuse because they should know better. the earlier versions of the Light Radio were supported officially in Express ELRS. I think the Light Radio 3 is the last one. Let me just have a look. Beta FPV. I've got the configurator open. Beta FPV. So, Light Radio 3 Pro is officially supported. So, why this nonsense around the Light Radio 4? This is not officially supported by the Express ELRS project. And it's just like, why? They have no excuse here, to be fair. Because at least I could have given Beta FPV a thumbs up if the radio did officially support the newer versions of Express ELRS. And it's hard to say Caddx have an excuse, but at least they've never made a bloody radio before. But again, I do not like this trend of manufacturers making products that are not supported by the open source projects that they are using. It is unacceptable. If you're going to use the project's firmware, then comply with the requirements of the project. It's not hard. And that's my gripe. So, look, there is that. But look, I don't have it. I can't comment on it. I do know, I watched a few of the reviews. I watched Stu UV Futures has a review, as do a few others. I think Drone Camps and a few others. It's as bad as Clipper. Clipper's in a right mess. It definitely doesn't behave the same as as Ascent. It doesn't have the same low signal behavior, but all of the comments I've seen is that it doesn't have the stuttering, apparently. But I haven't tried it for myself, so I can't comment. I can't say if it's any better. Caddx have officially released a firmware update for Ascent. There is a firmware update which apparently fixes some of the stuttering and improves latency. Haven't tried it myself yet. I will probably do it over the Christmas period, or I'll leave it a little bit more time to see if they come out with another one. If I'm going to redo all of my latency testing, I don't want to redo my latency testing and then release another firmware update, which they say improves it again. So they are saying they've improved the latency. If they can stop the stuttering I'm less worried about the latency. Look, 50 to 60 milliseconds on a 60 frames a second system isn't ideal, but it's not shocking for the product. I'd like it a little bit lower. You've got to take into account 60 frames a second, in theory, is always going to have a minimum of 37 milliseconds of latency at best, right? Your 37 milliseconds, whatever happens, because you're 60 frames a second. So you're going to be 37 milliseconds. That's best case scenario. So 50 to 60, whilst a little higher than I would like, it isn't a million miles off. It's not great, but it's not a million miles off. My bigger worry was the stuttering. The stuttering wasn't great at all. That was where my bigger complaint was on it. Consistent lag is better than jumpy latency. Yeah, exactly. And what they need to do is stabilize the link, the stuttering and the stabilization. So I haven't tried it. I'll try it over the Christmas period. Funny enough, I charged the batteries on it today to update the firmware. But yeah. So look, if I haven't seen any images or anything of a new VTX for Ascent, it might be on the Caddx group, I guess. Oh, God, what's happening there? It might be on the Caddx group, which I'm not part of anymore. Let me just have a look as someone has mentions down under radios. I haven't seen anything myself. We'll have to wait and see what it looks like. You know, 500 milliwatts and 100 frames a second on Ascent would be very good. Look, there is no reason it can't do more. What I think it's pretty clear Caddx rushed Ascent out before it was ready. And the reason for that is probably the beta FPV release. Let's be honest, this is the reason Caddx probably rushed. They wanted to be first to the market with the Protoss. You know, there's yeah, I suspect that's why it was rushed. So, but anyways, look, at some point, at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, the original latency test stands until I retest, and if I retest and the latency comes down, would 100 frames a second air side and 60 frames a second goggle side reduce latency? Yes, but you're also going to introduce stuttering. You'd actually need to take the goggles down to 50 frames ideally, and then drop every other frame and stop binning frames. For me, I'm less worried about the latency on the 60 frames a second and more worried about the link performance. As I said, I actually liked how the Artisan Link behaved on Ascent. I liked the low signal behavior. It wasn't terrible. The stuttering and the latency was the bigger problems for me. So let's see. You'd have to bin the frames. Because what you can't have. So if Caddx wanted to do 100 frames a second, they could do 120. If they could do 120, it's got to be half, because then you're out of sync. You have to match the frame rate, or at least have it in multiples. You can have it off, but you're then going to have a catch-up point. At some point, you're going to have to skip some frames to get it all leveled up. If you take DJI, so when you use the goggles 3 and goggles 2 in 120 frames a second mode, the goggles actually drop to 60 frames a second display, because they have to, because the goggles have 100 hertz OLEDs, but you can't easily put 100 hertz in, 120 in, and use 100, because you're not in a ratio. You can do it, but it causes problems. So take DJI's. That's why the 120 frames a second mode on DJI 04 and 03 is worse latency than 100, because it's actually 60 frames a second on the goggles. You have to. It's the only way to do it. So that way you can drop a whole frame. You can literally drop every other frame. You can then skip a frame. But it still gives you jarring. And this is why people say the 30 frames a second mode on DJI looks so bad. And it is. Because it's dropping frames everywhere to be able to give you that view. And that's why it's choppy as crap. You can do it the other way, but it's going to be even worse. But the downside then to dropping a frame is you then lose smoothness. Because the thing to take into account is, so if you are filming at 60 frames a second, your frame time, your actual frame time, let's just get this up on a calculator. So if we go 1000 divided by 60, which gives us 16.6 milliseconds, okay? But you're going to be doubling that between analog and digital if you are using fields instead of frames if you're interlaced, but that's a different world. But so you're talking 16.6 milliseconds, technically end to end. So the problem you have is if you start going outside the multiples, you then really start to get problems because these numbers don't add up to whole numbers. They're in multiples of each other. So you then start to get really weird behavior, and that's the problem with it. So look, that's where we're at on that. So let's see what Caddx do. If they can improve it. Someone just said they've put a message. Is there something on Facebook? Was there? I can't. Caddx Avatar Ascent. I can't see any links on my Discord anyway. So, they call it Ascent Lite Plus. Post is on Facebook and linked in the Caddx sub channel on my Discord. Have I missed this? Then let me just have a look. I cannot see. I can't see a post to Facebook. There's a band countdown party on Drone Nation. Okay, yeah. So, before we get on to the anti-gravity, obviously it's probably a good time to talk about DJI. Obviously, we're on the countdown now. Look, it's going to happen. That's a reality. I think there's no world where it doesn't happen now. Really, truth is, bugger all will change on day one because you can't buy anything anyway. So DJI are already largely in the ban situation. So day one, very little will happen. It is a shame. It is also of their own doing, but it is a shame and it could have been avoided. And it isn't that it could have been avoided by opening up their software or... Look, DJI took a very hard stance for many years. And again, I keep seeing lots of people talking about, you know, Skydio. Look, this is a very old, long and long-winded problem that's been bubbling forever. Bubbling along forever. It really, really has. It's not even as simple as unusual machines. It's not even as simple as Trump. This goes back. Look, those of us who've been around, there's a reason DJI hired Brendan Schulman. Brendan started to try and push all of the legislative stuff. And look, this is a difficult problem for DJI to solve because in some ways, if they'd have had enterprise manufacturing in the US years ago, I think they could have avoided this. But here's the truth, and this is the fact. DJI should not have to open up their IP. What they should have done, though, and here is where this all goes to hell, is they had on more than one occasion the opportunity to really provide an offline mode, and they didn't. DJI skirted and played games for way too long around, we're going to give you offline mode, but you're going to lose this capability, or you can only have it on these kinds of drones. Oh, and you've still got to activate. DJI fucked around, and now they found out. And that is their own fault. There is no world where DJI is blameless in this. It is completely their fault. If they'd have done three things, started some US manufacturing for enterprise products, actually gave proper offline capability and not dicked around with this, you can have offline mode, but you can't. You can have it on these products, but you can't. You can do this, but then you can't do that. And made it so fucking hard, they would have, to a point, not been here. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't have still happened. In the end. In the end, it fundamentally comes down to DJI being Chinese, US being US, China versus US. In the end, it comes down to that. And it's not Trump. It's not. It goes back a very, very long way. They could have done a dramatic amount more. And I think they pushed their luck too far in the end. But the truth is, none of that may have changed the position they're in today. Because we're in a very different world now. And look, DJI is... Look, nothing changes. It is still the best FPV system. For the rest of the world, life carries on. It's a US problem. Sadly for US users, but you'll still be able to get them in bind and flies. You'll still be able to buy them on AliExpress. Supply is pretty low right now of 04. I personally think DJI have a little bit of a chip shortage going on. It's not just 04. It's a number of things. DJI, I think the S series might be in low supply. And there are a few reasons for this. You're seeing shortages of the transceiver unit for the Neo 2. You're seeing shortages of the 04 ear units. Overall stock is very low. Possibly this is down to... Remember, there is still somewhat of a problem in the chip world. And the cost of manufacturing right now may be a little bit high, and DJI might be thinking, with the US ban, with all of this going on, we'll just hold things back. Look, there's no technical reason why there's a limitation on 04s in the UK and Europe, but I do think DJI is being very careful of their supply. 03 is deleted. Yeah, 03's end of life. 03's gone because of that chipset. DJI are removing that chipset from all their drones. You've also got to take into account DJI are migrating all of their drones to the new S2 chipset as well. I'm not being funny, when it comes to production capacity, 04 is not going to be priority. Yeah, the UK is struggling. Europe's having... Supply has been up and down. It just has. But it's been like that for 6 or 7 months. In fact, it would be insane if DJI wasn't being careful with their supply right now. The truth is, they have to be careful with the manufacturing numbers. They don't want to sit on stock. So it makes sense. It is a little bit challenging right now. But there's no great issue. You know, DJI 04 Pro UK. Let's just have a look what the supply is like. 05's not likely. No, you're not going to see 05 anytime soon. There's no real need. 05. 05's a complicated one. A product might come with 05 naming, but I wouldn't expect to see 05. Look, from an RF perspective, DJI ain't changing that chipset for another 3 or 4 years minimum, right? They haven't even put it in their latest drones yet. They do have a bigger processor coming for video side, but it makes no real sense to put that into 04 because that's really going to be needed for like 360 higher end image processing. Look, there's a reality here. 04 Pro could be the last 04 system from DJI. Where'd you go from here with it? It is as good as anything else. Could they do it with, buddy, 120 frames a second, better, higher recording rates? Maybe. But the reality is, you're not going to see an MFT sensor in 04. You know, you're not going to see Micro Four Thirds appear there. 04 is somewhat the peak. Look, people are always going to try and take advantage. 04 Ear Unit Pro, yeah, out of stock. Yeah, supply has been quite low. What about the DJI Hasselblad store? Hasselblad store in the UK says pre-order. Okay, so they haven't got them. Yeah, look, supply is low. Supply isn't great right now. Wow, I didn't know Scan was selling it. Interesting. Yeah, look, DJI have a new chipset on the horizon. We've people have mentioned for a while, which is very much beefed up for the next generation of vision capabilities in their drones. O4 doesn't need that. We've basically reached the peak of O4 OcuSync from an RF perspective. Unless they change the RF chipset, I don't really know where they go now. Remember, the only thing you could see from DJI is they could choose to make it dual or tri-band. Well, it's dual band now because O4 does 5.2 and 5.8. But they could choose to release a version of it with 2.4 gigs on board as well. But they probably won't. We're pretty much at the limit on this side of it for a while. There will be an inevitable naming of O5 eventually. It's going to happen because it's marketing. But from a technology perspective, we're somewhat at peak now. But look, yeah, look, UK and Europe is struggling. It has been for months on and off. I suspect DJI is being very careful with supply. But I actually think it's more related to the S2 chipset. That makes a lot more sense. But look, we're days from the ban. Look, nothing will change on day one. You know, Best Buy have been ripping out DJI stands. I do know that. And they've been putting in Potensic and the Antigravity stands. It is what it is now. I don't have that many O4 Pro Air units. I'm actually very low on O4s myself. NACO doesn't work on O4. You use the ham file. So thank you for the £10 super chat. So the FCC hack on O3 and O4 is not NACO, it's the ham file. I have a video on it. It's the same video for the Avata 2. It's the ham file. Do I think you should activate your new ear units now? Like, I don't see any need for people to run around spending time activating products. DJI is not stopping the ban with effect. I don't see any impact on your ear units or anything at all. Look, from a DJI side, they're not going to do anything. It'll be fine. Like, I wouldn't be rushing to do anything. It's as simple as that. The only thing we could see, and look, Cook100, thank you for the £10 super chat. So, ham file, if you search my channel, if I go to YouTube, DJI O3 FCC hack, it's the same thing. I probably need to make a video for O4. I don't think I actually did the standalone video for O4, did I? Oh, there's a gap. I did it in a questions video, not a standalone video. Oh, wow. BBQ King FPV, a £50 super chat. That's incredible. Oh, my God. Merry Christmas. Thanks for being a legend. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's incredible. That's amazing. Thank you. It really is appreciated, but thank you for that. That is great. Any upcoming videos on OpenIBC or Ruby? Zero, because I can't fly. There's no, like, I'm not going to revisit that until I see something dramatically change. I've seen nothing dramatically change at all. So until I do see something dramatically change, I dip in and out and keep an eye on OpenIBC. But again, it's the same excuses, the same stuff. Other people, I don't get this, and other people going, I'm getting it on goggles. Look, I said before, go back when I go back and watch my videos, I said it's still years off being there. The only one I do want to try and get onto is APFPV, but the weather here is horrific. So until I get near that. But look, it has to get to a stage where it's viable. Right now, you're seeing more than anything hardware vendors pulling out of OpenIPC from what I've seen. Too much hype long before it was ready. And it's still not ready. I'd like to see it step forward, but we need these issues resolved. $5 super chat. Thank you. Just bought Integras and RC2 for 275 good. That is cheap. Is there any way to get the O4 Lite to work on 6S since the Pro? You're just going to have to use it on a back. So to use the O4 Lite on 6S, you just need a flight controller with a back. You can't use it directly on 6S. You need to use a back. But look, so from DJI's perspective, it's going to happen. Let's wait and see. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Don't think for 1 minute anyone actually cares that you won't be able to buy drones. From a US perspective, government perspective, they don't give a toss. They don't even care if people die as a result of it. Don't. They won't care. They just don't care about you, your problems, or your problems stopping people from dying, whether that be search and rescue, police, agencies. They just don't care. The ban will happen, and then we'll wait and see. And look, most people will just grey import and carry on with their lives. DJI will still have FCC modes. The only problem will be, will they still FCC certify the products? Don't know. If they're banned, is there any need to? So look, yeah. They are buying Sky. They're not even buying Skydio and Red Cat. Look. The drone, I've said this before, the drone industry is so immature still today. A guy with a drone in the back of a car is not what they want. They don't want you to have these drones. They don't want people. They don't want some guy in the back of a car pitching up. This is all about control. This is all about industrializing the use of drone. Industrializing the use of and controlling the use of drones. Unusual Machines are not all responsible for this. Again, I have no interest in defending Trump, his boy, or some of the people involved with Rotor Riot, Unusual Machines, and Red Cat. There's a lot I could say on them, but let me be clear. These are not the reason DJI is banned. This goes back a very, very, very long time. Lon has been around as long as I have, and he knows it. Like, we both know this. This is far more complicated, far more political than this. Remember, the people who signed this in weren't the people who are in power today. This has been coming for a very, very long time. What you're seeing with Unusual Machines, what you're seeing with these people are them now, the aftermath of it happening. Maybe take the FCC to court. For what? You don't have the right to do what you want. You seem to forget that you don't actually have the right to do what you want in your own country. It's legislation. You're required to comply with the law, and this is a law change, so suck it up. It's it goes back forever. Look, this has been bubbling. Look, has Skydio had the knife in? Of course they have. Has Unusual Machines taken advantage of it? Of course they have. But it isn't as simple as, oh, this one person caused this, or this one person caused that. It's yeah, the retro ban, but the retro ban is complicated. If they pull the retro ban, that could just mean that no new products can come in, but existing products retain their certification. So even if they retro ban, it probably won't affect you anyway. All existing product in country would still be legal, but it would just stop DJI continuing to import the existing ones. That's the way it's being understood. So if you already own a Mini 4 Pro, it's FCC certified, it's fine. But today, DJI could still, even after the ban, DJI could still ship the Mini 4 Pro in. What that would mean is that they withdraw all of the certifications to stop DJI bringing new product, old pre-certified product in, is what the idea is. The idea is to stop the flow of the product into the country completely. So, an example, O4 is currently FCC certified. That means your existing units will be fine. So this ban today doesn't change the fact that O4 is buyable in the US. The ban doesn't stop O4 coming in. O4 is pre-certified. O4 can still be sold. O4 goggles, the O3 goggles, O4 goggles, the goggles 3, all of that can still be sold. It's pre-certified. The reason you can't buy it is it's all being held up in the ports because they're playing other games down there. But this back ban, they say withdraw a certification. The idea of that is any product that was previously certified will no longer be certified to be imported, but those who've already got it will be fine. They could ship them in if they could get them past customs. Yeah, which is a different problem, as Lon knows. There's a customs problem as well. Hence the reason I've already said nothing will change. Because you can't even get the existing products in the US. You know, the ban doesn't stop your existing products, O4, coming into the US. There is no reason you shouldn't be bringing in other products. What's happening is, and I have a video on this and I've discussed it, another excuse is being used to block DJI products at the ports to do with the Uyghurs and the use of DJI drones and all of that stuff. It's funny how brand new was put in the FCC in 2012, things starting to change. This ban for DJI was put in place in December last year. This ban has been talked about for like 4 years. Nothing new has happened. The game was laid, the egg was laid about 18 months ago in the current plan. I'm not sure they would need to follow an administrative process. The fact that DJI, as soon as DJI goes on the entities list, that in itself would be enough to withdraw the existing certifications. They won't need to have stuff tested. That DJI enter the entities list, that then means that triggers the fact that the FCC can then retrospectively withdraw the products. And actually, the law that the FCC, or the new power the FCC has introduced, actually makes sense. It actually does make sense. Because if a product is deemed dangerous, I'm not talking about DJI here, I'm just talking about anyone, but if a product is deemed dangerous, you do want the ability to stop that coming in. This whole Uyghur thing has been a way of blocking the products getting in now. But again, as Lon says, nothing will stop you from flying your existing drone. Nope. I'm not even sure that's these days, Islander FPV. National security concerns preempt. I think it's always been the case. I think, look, it's DJI will be deemed a security risk, enter the entities list, withdraw existing certifications to stop the import of new product. And then DJI will have no way of getting anything in. you know. But again, look, there are a lot of people to blame here, but DJI is top of the list as well. Don't be fooled into thinking nasty Skydio, nasty unusual machines. No. DJI are in this fucking position through some of their own behaviour as well. This is the outcome of many years of issues, problems, lots and lots of issues. So look, with it will be what it will be. It's as simple as that. It really is. You know, we'll have to see what comes next. Many solar cycles are fucking just fuckery all around. Trust me, there's enough fuckery on DJI. Remember, DJI are the ones whose early apps, don't forget, DJI's early apps were pulling data. They were early apps, were communicating with dodgy servers. There's always, look, there's red. DJI's apps are up from your logs. You know, here's a great example of what DJI could have done. DJI encrypted all of your flight logs so you could no longer see the data that was within them. What good reason was there for DJI encrypting your flight logs on your devices? They could have opened that up. Remember, there are a lot of little reasons here. DJI gave you the option of deleting all of your data, but they never gave you the option of showing you what they were actually recording. The early drones could. A-Data and other websites could deal with the early logs. Later logs were all encrypted. So again, DJI is not blameless here. There's an SD card. It's memory now, but there was an SD card in many internal drones. You never had access to it. Yeah, you had no choice. So there's a number of things that DJI have done over the years to get themselves here. It is in the end, it is largely of their own making, with other people taking advantage of it. You know, as for Skydio, yes, they'll probably sell more drones now, but they're not alone. Unusual machines will sell more. Everyone will sell more to the US. That's how it will be. Look, there are many things with DJI that they've done wrong to get them here. So, again, I don't really have sympathy in any shape or form. It is entirely of their own making in the end. And that's why I have no sympathy for DJI in it. Fat Snail FPV, I did mention it. There's no NACO. There is a ham file hack, which is this. Search for these videos here. 04 and 03 use the ham file hack. I don't sympathise with multi-billion-dollar corporations in general. Yeah, it's look, the old term "F around and find out" really does suit this situation, but again, it is a shame. Still the best product on the market. Yes, look, there are already new products. And look, this leads me over nicely to what we're going to talk about next. And I'm going to explain this because I want to cut this as a video as well. So I'm just loosely talking here while I get myself ready. Today, I got to fly the Antigravity A1. A weird experience. I don't know who come up with the idea of the way it flies, the initial control method. Very, very weird. Very weird. I don't know how I feel about the main method of control on this drone out the box. It's weird. It's not that it doesn't fly well, it's just weird. Put the legs down. I prefer the FPV mode. That's for sure. Let me just bring up the SD card. It's really quite strange. Oh, I can't even show it. Do you know what? There's a really annoying... You can't just play back the screen record. Insta360. You have to use Insta360 Studio. I don't know if you heard that. A pipe fell down. No, look, I couldn't fly for long because it started to rain. I'm going to have to download Insta360 Studio. Well, I bought one. No, look, I managed to get one battery on it, and that was it today. I just literally... Oh, is there an A1 Studio? Is there? I haven't even looked. Is that on the Antigravity website? Is there? Windows. Oh, yeah, Antigravity Studio. Bloody annoying. I haven't had enough flight time on it yet. I don't like the way it flies. In the sense of the control action. I think they should have shipped it with a proper remote, if I'm honest. Yeah, do you know what, Lon? I come up against the fly backwards today. So, flying, trying to land, bring it into hang catch, and I put it in front of me, and then I went, well, how do I fly backwards? And you can't. And I was like, that's weird. Because I was like going, well, how do I now bring it in? It's not a gimmick. Gimmick isn't the right term. It's a very different kind of drone. It's, sorry, I'm just installing the studio. It's a different kind of drone. It's... I preferred it in FPV mode. The controlling method is weird. Just really, really weird. No, it can't fly backwards. Not that I found so far. No, it doesn't do acro. Yeah, and it's got a very weird control method. In FPV mode, it was more like DJI's. I'm not sure it's a gimmick or a fad. The ability to look around was incredibly interesting. Look, it has its use case. Is it a replacement for every type of standard camera drone? I'd be shocked if those goggles were under $1,000. $800 or $900. The goggles are pretty good, to be amazed, to be fair. I don't like the screen orientation, though. I'm not a big fan of the big vertical screen. It's made for... Look, it's designed to be a different product. And it absolutely, you know, once you like any 360 camera, most people buy a 360 camera and get disappointed. And that is largely because they don't understand the product. So I've finally got Studio open. Right, let's have a look. Okay. So here you can see the video. I'm just going to mute it. So this was me just sitting on the beach and doing the first takeoff. This is the very first flight. So this was me getting ready. You can see I'm just checking everything's good. Taking off. So this is the recording from the goggles. This is the same beach. I managed to get a bit of light and then move forward. And then I stopped and had a look around. And this is me trying to just get my head around it. There was my spotter over there with the dog because he goes nuts for dogs. So I had to send them. I got to send them further back. So you can see now this is me looking around. Yeah, that's the view you see in the goggles. That's the exact orientation and view you see in the goggles. It's very vertical. Nope, no gimbal, no movement. So again, you can see here. So just so for those who don't understand, when you saw me look around then, that's my controller that you can see there. Now I'm trying to get my head around the controls at this point because I watched the videos. And I'm like trying to get my head around what it's doing. And it is really weird. And you'll see in a second. And I show you something in a minute. And let me just move forward. Right, so you can see here me looking around. And this is me, but I want to show you something which is interesting. So what that view there does, when you see that little box come up, that is the view ahead of the drone. So you can see there, that was the view, the direction of travel. So when you look away from the direction of travel, that it's no longer in view, it brings the box up, which is the direction of travel. So there's a point here in a minute where I look around. Where is it? Not there. I was flying back. So in a minute, what you'll see is me. This is me just trying to figure out how it feels as I'm flying around. Oh, no. Why did that stop? It definitely takes some getting used to. I struggled with it on the first flight in the normal control mode because you have to move your whole body to change the orientation of the aircraft. See there, look, I'm looking that way and it was flying forward. It's really weird. So you can see there me looking around. It's a very weird perspective. Yeah, it's climbing because of me with the controller. Right? I was having trouble with the altitude climbing. I had a habit of pointing the remote upwards. You've got to keep the remote straight. Yeah, it's worth mentioning, actually, where Lon said there. Now, you'll see in a minute, I hop into FPV mode to have a look in FPV mode. I was like, okay, let me try this in FPV mode. Hop out the menu. I'm back in. And then in FPV mode, I found it a bit easier to control. But yeah, you got to watch the remote. You will naturally gain altitude in the normal fly mode if you're not holding it right. I then found And this was just me scooting around. Yeah, it's FPV mode with the love toy. It behaves more like the DJI love mode in FPV mode. So here's interesting. So what you see here is this, right? So I'll show you this here. So I come around and then we start talking. Yeah, it's definitely a weird thing to fly. So you can now see there, look, I'm looking backwards and the aircraft is flying forwards. I tend to tilt the remote forward. I was tilting it up. It's definitely a weird experience. But what you'll see in a minute is, and the bit I want to show you is, there's one point where I'm flying backwards. I'm flying forwards whilst looking backwards. So what you end up doing is holding the remote. So here, look, you'll see here. So I'm looking backwards whilst flying forwards. It's a weird experience. It really is a weird experience. Yeah, so you can use the wheel to look around, which I'm using here, but in the normal flight mode, it doesn't do that. You've got to do this and move your whole body as orientation. So here, I'm looking backwards. I think you'll see that. Yeah, you'll see, look, I'm flying forwards, but looking backwards. If you wrist your wrist. So there, look, you can see I'm looking backwards whilst flying forwards. So I'm looking out of the little view. And then flying it that way. And climbing, yeah, because of... Yeah, and I was climbing again because if you look, I've got the fucking thing. Where's the remote? I was hovering up with the remote controller. So, look, it's a very weird experience. It really, really is a weird experience. And I only got one flight on it because it started to rain. I didn't have enough. I haven't fully got to grips with the controls remotely. I really haven't. But that just gives you an idea of... I turned my... You know, you had to turn myself. You've got to turn yourself around. You have to rotate your orientation. You don't get lipo voltage, you get percentage, like any normal DJI drone. This is just down West Wales, this is. And I went back into FPV mode then, just to try it back in FPV mode. And you can see here, I had the remote up. See, that dot there is the remote, so you've got to watch it. You can do the hokey pokey. Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird experience. It genuinely is a very, very weird experience. I got to here and I was like, okay. I went back down. So this is me hand catching it. See, there's a point where I brought it back and I did the lawn. So I brought it back and I was looking up at the sky and I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? And I was then going to bring it in backwards and realised I couldn't bring it in backwards. So I was coming in and I was like, right, bring it in backwards. I'd taken the goggles off at this point, and I was looking towards myself, so I spun it around, look. And I was like, how can I go backwards? I can't. So I had to bring it back towards myself and fly it in towards me. Because I just was like, I can't do this. And then I hand caught. And that was it. So yeah, look, it is absolutely a weird experience. Genuinely, it's a weird experience. That takes some getting used to. Now, the one thing I want to quickly discuss on this, because there's some confusion and I'm getting things. So let me just get this in the right place. Let me just close that. Right now, there seems to be a lot of confusion over the Antigravity A1, and specifically when it comes to CE mode and flying it, because there are lots of people trying this quad out, and one of the main pieces of feedback that I have seen on this is people getting very poor range. Now, first thing you need to understand is that there is a difference on this quad in FCC mode compared to CE. FCC mode gives you up to 30 dBm of power, which is 1 watt, whereas CE gives you 25 milliwatts. However, it isn't as simple as that, because this drone is actually tri-band. It operates on 2.4 gigahertz, 5.2 gigahertz, and 5.8 gigahertz. And whilst it is limited to 14 dBm, 25 milliwatts of power in 5 gigahertz mode, you actually have a lot more power in the lower frequency mode of 5.2 gigahertz. When we look at the spec on the Antigravity website for this quad, and I have just deleted the page by accident. Wow, well done. How to break the flow. So I'm going to have to cut that in. Get in there. Get in there. Spec. Edit. Yeah, that's for sure. Video transmission. Here we go. So when we look... Whoops, indeed. When we look at the power of this on the Antigravity website, you can see on 2.4 gigahertz in FCC, it supports up to 30 dBm of output, which is 1 watt. CE regions give you 20 dBm of power, which is less than 200 milliwatts. You're talking, I think it's about 140 milliwatts off the top of my head. Can't remember exactly what 20 dBm. What is... I fucked that now. What's 20 dBm? Is it 140? Sorry. No, 23 dBm is 200. It's 100. Yeah, couldn't get there in my brain. So, when you look at the Antigravity website, you'll see that there are different power outputs depending on the mode you're in. And you've also got a different output depending on your region. So, for instance, in FCC mode, which is the United States, in 2.4 gigahertz mode, you have 30 dBm of power. 5.1 gigahertz mode is not available in the US, but you do also have 30 dBm of power in 5.8 gigahertz. CE, though, has much lower power. CE regions include the UK, Europe, and a number of other countries around the world. So if you're in any of these countries, Germany, Spain, France, the UK, your drone is actually going to be running in CE mode, which gives you 20 dBm of output in 2.4 gigahertz, which is 100 milliwatts, 21 dBm. Ah, bollocks. Why have they done that? Why have they moved FCC to there? I'll record this as a standalone video. The basics are, yes, it does switch when you travel to different regions. Yeah, they put the lower power numbers to the right, not the fucking region. So, if we take a look at the spec on the Antigravity website, you will see that you've got different power levels for the bands as well as regions. For instance, FCC mode is the USA. You over there in 2.4 GHz mode have 30 dBm of output as well as 30 dBm in 5.8 GHz mode. Whilst it does show a 21 dBm output for the USA in 5.2, it's my understanding most drones don't use the 5.2 GHz in the US, and it is generally only available in Europe. For European users and UK, so CE region, the power output drops dramatically. Whereas in the US in 2.4 gigs, you have 30 dBm. In Europe, you have 20 dBm. That is a dramatic difference in RF power, a drop from 1 watt of RF power down to just 100 milliwatts. In 5.8 GHz mode, the drop is even bigger. You're dropping from 1 watt of RF power in the US region FCC down to just 25 milliwatts, 14 dBm in CE regions. There is, though, a little bit of a golden band in here, and that is the 5.1 or 5.2 GHz band, because in CE regions, you're actually allowed 23 dBm, which is 200 milliwatts, both more power than in 2.4 gigs and 5.8. For anyone using the Antigravity A1 in Europe, whilst the 2.4 GHz band would usually be the band of choice, the 5.1 GHz will in most cases offer better performance, simply as a result of A, having more RF power, but B, being a much less congested band as well. Getting there. So, if you are flying this drone in Europe, if you want to get the best power... Exactly. See? 2.4 will be congested as shit. Now, technically, the lower frequency, longer wavelength of 2.4 GHz is going to give you better performance over a higher frequency, shorter wavelength of the likes of 5.1 or 5.8. But the big difference here is congestion, because the 5.1 GHz band will have far less congestion than 2.4 or 5.8, and whilst technically the 2.4 gigs band has always traditionally been the best choice from a radio performance range perspective, for this drone you want to be selecting the 5.2, the 5.1. You want to be selecting... Fuck. Now you wonder why it takes me so long to make content. You want to be selecting the 5.1 GHz band because A, it has more power than 5.8 and 2.4 in CE, but it is also going to be a lot less congested. Something else to take into account with this as well, and this has been from my testing, is that the RF system on this drone, whilst it is highly dynamic, tends to want to stick to the 2.4 GHz band. And whilst you may think auto is the best option, it is my experience that actually setting manual 2.4... I'm going to do this offline. Basics are, stick the frickin' drone in 5.1 GHz manual mode and you'll probably get more performance in CE. There you go. Yeah, so I'll do it offline. Sometimes you try to do it online and they just can't, and it just doesn't work. The basics are here, guys. In my experience, and all of my bench testing, the system in this is actually very, very interesting. And it is very much like DJI in the sense of how dynamic it is. It certainly is frequency hopping. It is, in fact, jumping around the band quite a lot. Far more advanced than what our Caddx are using in Ascent. Bear in mind, it's the same chipset. The RF system in this is dramatically more advanced. Tri-band, highly dynamic. But what I have found is it really wants to hang on to 2.4 gigs, even when it shouldn't. And to give you an idea, today I did some testing on this where I basically blasted it with RF on 2.4 gigs. We had a completely clear 5.2 gigs band, and it wouldn't switch to 5.2 in auto. It just hung on to 2.4 until it lost frequency. And I think that's part of the reason people are seeing problems with this drone in CE. I'm going to make a dedicated video on this. Bandwidth, it'll do up to 40 megahertz. Full up to 40 megahertz bandwidth. Very dynamic, like 04, hopping around the band. It very much behaves a lot. You know, this, I can tell you now, this is a lot more advanced than I've even seen on the likes of the Potensic Atom 2. But I think they have a slight algorithm problem, and I think it's hanging on to 2.4 gigs too much. It absolutely can switch bands whilst being connected. I've seen it do it. So for instance, if you put it into manual channel mode on 5.2 gigs and switch back to auto, it will jump down to 2.4 gigs. So it can absolutely switch band. But it is definitely hanging on to 2.4 gigs too much. Way, way too much. And I suspect they've got some algorithm that says prioritize 2.4. And the reason this will be causing problems for people in CE is you just don't have the power in 2.4 gigs. And that is such a congested band, you're going to have a problem. It'll all be on Antigravity side. Yeah, it's a lot like DJI's megabytes issue. Look, I tell you what I am impressed with was how far ahead. Like, it will dynamically switch bandwidth down to 10 megahertz just like DJI. So it'll go 40 megahertz carrier, 20 megahertz carrier, 10 megahertz carrier. It'll jump, and it frequency hops on the same band. What I haven't been able to get it to do is jump naturally, say from 2.4 to 5.2 to 5.8. And again, when I absolutely blasted it with 2.4 gigs, and here's the funny thing, do you know what the best product for doing that is? A good old DJI Mavic 2 Pro. Because the OcuSync on this is high bandwidth, dumb as hell, right? So you can force it onto the frequency you want, and it won't do any of this channel hopping bullshit. This will just go, oh, I'm sitting here, and everything else has to move around it. And you can't beat a good old light bridge or an early OcuSync system, OcuSync 2 in this, to really screw over the band. And if anyone's used an old O2 system, it'll even wipe out Wi-Fi with O2. It is phenomenal at blasting the band with high bandwidth RF. So, but yeah, there is an inherent sitting on 2.4 gigs. And I think that's causing problems for CE users. And look, I had a bit of a back and forth with a guy on Facebook today who said he had a degree in RF engineering, and I was wrong. And in his words, where 2.4 gigahertz is always going to be the best choice. And it freaking absolutely is not. Number one, more RF power, 23 dBm, 200 milliwatts versus 100 milliwatts and 2.4 gigs. I would still take the longer wavelength, 2.4 in the ideal scenario, but man, is that band congested, and that is the problem here. 915 would be better, but yeah. So I'm going to put a dedicated video on this, but if you're a CE user, I think if you're flying around congested areas, manual 5.1 gigahertz is the band to put the drone in. I would not be using auto. I would try it. I think you might see a better improvement. And that's from my personal RF testing. So that's what I was trying to say. So why does ExpressRS 2.4 do so well? That's a combination of the wavelength and an ultra lightweight carrier. You got to take into account ExpressRS is LoRa. It's a chirp. The reason LoRa does so well, think of LoRa, well, think of LoRa like a bird chirping away in the garden. You hear chip, 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 and that sound goes much further than, say, a long, a piece of music or something else. ExpressLRS, you're chirping data. Very, very small packets of data. And the advantage to very small packets of data is that it's able to cut through. It's even, it's the protocol as well. It's the way it moves through, because it actually changes frequency as it moves through to tell it the position it's in. It's fast, it's ultra lightweight, it's not the same kind of modulation, and it just cuts through. Yeah, someone named it. No carrier in the sense. Yeah, it's tiny. Look, it's a chirp. It's a is what it is. I've shown the carrier packets, and you simply have a slight change in frequency. It's very cool. Whereas high bandwidth digital video is an entirely different ballgame. But yeah, something I would say is, look, I can't tell you this is a 04 technology, but it certainly isn't like, oh my god, fixed carrier, can't do this, can't do that, can't do this. On paper, this is very, very capable. Yeah, I'm using this drone for 360. That is a great, internal video. Yeah, absolutely. Latency's okay. I haven't done latency testing on the bench with it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, because it does. I'd have to make a whole new rig to test the latency on this. It's capable. It's very, very promising. It really is. I think DJI still have something in their pocket. A box with 2 LEDs. Yeah, it needs to go in a sealed box with the light flashes so it can be seen all round. But I'm less worried about latency. I didn't really do latency tests on camera drones before. It's to a point irrelevant. We know it's like 100, 120 milliseconds. That's what it's going to be. It's like 100, 150, something like that. That's what the spec is. I wouldn't worry. Yeah, but I'm not sure. Look, I think DJI... I don't know what DJI can bring to the table with this. I'm not sure. There's so much new here. I don't know if an Avata 360 is going to feel very boring in comparison. Here's what I would say. If DJI think that just slapping a 360 camera on it and adding a few tweaks to the software. This is dramatically different, even from a software perspective. An Avata 360, again, it cannot just be a drone with a 360 camera, and I can see that's why they've done a lot of what they've done here. You know. And I don't know. Look, DJI's 360 software is complete junk still today. So they've got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. Yeah, look, if DJI's is probably more like a combination between a traditional drone and this. This is so far out there. Do I think the delay? There's no delay on the 360 release. As far as I was told, it wasn't happening until next year. It's never been on the cards this year. People seem to think the Avata 360 was this year. It's never been this year. I was told it's February at the very earliest. Yeah, to the front for landing in normal modes. Yeah, that makes sense. Look, I'm not aware that there's been any delay on the 360. DJI's plans are DJI's plans. Yeah, DJI do seem to have the rotating lens makes a bit more sense. So you're not going to have the traditional field of view because it's still a 180 lens. But it does mean you can move the stitch line. It does mean you can move the stitch line. And, you know, where DJI will win is on latency because it'll be more like their FPV products. What is quite interesting about this is that it is entirely new as well. I really like the goggles. I don't like the fucking remote at all. But we'll have to see what what they deliver. You know, look, the Neo 2 is interesting, but there's a really good video by DC Rainmaker. I don't know if you saw this on the Neo 2. And it just shows, and to be fair, this isn't just DJI. I think it was DC Rainmaker.
Okay, so the teams are just pulling in here for the...
Yeah, he takes the Neo and the Hover Air X1, and frankly, both of these drones are writing checks they can't cash when it comes to the tracking. If you're interested in seeing about... The Neo 2 has some weird crashes as well. But I'll be honest, neither of these drones, neither of them can do what they're selling them to do. That's the truth. Can they follow you? Yes. Can you trust them? No. Like, look, just watch there. Look at the Neo 2 crash. It's tracking him. And he's in ski mode. And it gets low. And then it just crashes. And it's in the special mode designed for ski. But it's the same. You watch any of the videos on these drones. None of them. The Hover Air X1. They're all writing checks they can't cash. That's the truth here. We are still years away from proper tracking. That's the truth from a tracking perspective. And for the price, the Neo 2 is £200 drone. Yeah, the Neo 2 does well, but neither of them are good enough. That's the argument here. The argument is neither of them are good enough. Need lasers to track properly. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, look. And they're all as bad as each other. Yeah, they've got height sensors. They've got the sensors. All of these have got downward-facing TOF sensors. They've got downward-facing cameras. They've got baro sensors. Both of these drones are packed with sensors. The truth is, the tech isn't there yet. It's just not there yet. They've got TOF sensors pointing down. They've got LiDAR. It's just the software. It needs, you know. Yeah, it's down to 700. Yeah, the Hover is an expensive drone. You know, they're both. All of these sort of follow me drones are writing checks they can't cash. They're all overestimating. Self-driving will be here next year. We're only just a few years away from self-driving. Yeah, the tech's here, but not in a platform for 300 or 400. But even on the bike trips, I've seen there's a few reviews. None of them can really do it well. You know, even on there's a great review by one of the bike guys, and he's just crashing all over the place. Are they getting better? Yes. Are we at the stage where you can just go hand out, drone in the air, and drive it on? No. You're going to be keeping an eye on it. You're going to be. We're probably still 5 to 10 years away. AI will probably help. If I'm honest, there'll be a point where AI really does start to help this thing, where it can start to predict the movement of the pilot, of the guy it's tracking. Because the issue is today, they're all reactionary. They're all reacting after the move has taken place. Whereas at some point we'll be in a world where you have AI navigation where it will start to predict the path so it can introduce the move before the move has actually happened. And that's when it will probably get better. And then you'll have better sensors, cheaper sensors. Yeah, look, it's there today, but is it there in $300? You know, the Neo 2 is incredibly cheap for what it is. But as I said, they're all writing checks they can't cash yet. They're all a few years off this. Right, guys, that's it for tonight. Look, I want to say a huge thank you to the Super Chats tonight. It's been incredible. Doc, BBQ King, amazing, $50. Doc, £10. No Slash, just bought the Integras, $5. Amazing, really do appreciate it. Look after yourselves, stay safe. We will be back after the big day next week. It's bring your presents next week. Make sure you bring them with you. We'll compare. Look after yourselves. Merry Christmas. Stay safe. And I will speak to you all soon.